In the distant reaches of the galaxy, far from the bustling stars of well-established empires, humanity was nothing more than a faint whisper among the vastness of space. The great cosmic predators, the Zelthar Dominion, the Karnak Hive, and the Shoroth Scourge, ruled with absolute power, each empire built on conquest, strength, and a cold, unfeeling superiority. For centuries, they had waged war against one another, fought for dominance, and crushed countless lesser species under their heel. These alien civilizations had grown accustomed to their positions at the top of the food chain, their rule over the galaxy unchallenged, their very names spoken with awe and fear. To them, Earth was just another forgotten planet, its inhabitants mere primitives scrambling for survival in a corner of the universe, oblivious to the grand schemes of the cosmos. What they failed to understand, however, was that Earth's isolation, its distance from the galactic stage, had allowed something extraordinary to take place. Over centuries, the planet's untamed wilderness had silently grown and evolved, giving rise to predators unlike any the galaxy had ever known. Species long considered the pinnacle of Earth's wild ecosystems, lions, tigers, wolves, and bears, had quietly adapted in ways that no other creatures in the galaxy could. But these were not the same simple creatures of old. Something far more powerful, more intelligent was emerging. It was as though Earth's beasts had tapped into a forgotten force, one that had been lying dormant in their genes, waiting to awaken. The first signs were subtle, a strange shift in animal behavior, a deeper connection between the wild creatures and the Earth itself. But soon, the changes became impossible to ignore. Then, in an event that would shake the very foundation of the galaxy, Earth's first interstellar signal was sent out. It wasn't a message of peace, nor was it a cry for help. It was something far more chilling. The message was simple, fragmented, almost incomprehensible to the advanced alien races that intercepted it. It was as though the planet itself had spoken, an ancient and primal command. The only word that could be understood, with absolute clarity, was a single, terrifying word: awaken. The galaxy's predators, accustomed to their iron grip on power, took no immediate action. They were curious, yes, but dismissive. They had conquered worlds before, wiped out entire species in the blink of an eye. What threat could a primitive planet like Earth pose? Perhaps some small, insignificant signal from a species that didn't even know the true meaning of the word war. The Shoroth Scourge, ruthless and brutal in their conquests, ignored the warning entirely. The Zelthar Dominion, with their cold, calculating intelligence, dismissed the message as the ramblings of an undeveloped race. Even the Karnak Hive, notorious for their hive-driven aggression, couldn't comprehend the significance of the signal. They simply continued their expansion, assuming Earth was no different from the countless other worlds they had consumed. But the message had been received. It was more than a call. It was a declaration. In the shadow of this mysterious communication, Earth's predators began to stir. They weren't the same creatures the galaxy's invaders had long forgotten. These were animals now touched by something ancient, something far beyond their original evolutionary paths. Their instincts were sharper, their strength greater, their intelligence deeper. It wasn't just the wild that was changing. It was the very essence of Earth itself. The creatures that had once been simple and solitary began to act as one. And they were no longer content to stay hidden in the shadows of their planet's jungles, oceans, and skies. They were evolving, growing, and preparing for something far bigger than they had ever known. The galaxy, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to unfold, continued in its arrogant complacency. Yet, the first ripple of this awakening had already begun. The predators of Earth were no longer waiting for their time to come. They were ready to fight, ready to rise, ready to unleash their fury. The question was no longer if the galaxy was prepared for what was coming, but if it could survive. And as the first hints of Earth's creatures' newfound power spread across the stars, a deep, gnawing uncertainty began to settle in the hearts of the galaxy's greatest empires. They had no idea what was truly coming, but soon they would. And when they did, the galaxy would never be the same again. Back on Earth, a strange and unsettling change had begun in the planet's most remote and untouched regions. Deep within, the dense jungles of the Amazon, across the barren deserts of Africa, and in the icy, wind-whipped poles, a shift was happening that no one could have predicted. Animals that had once been considered calm or predictable were now displaying behaviors that were nothing short of extraordinary. Lions, long revered as the kings of the jungle, were now working together with a level of coordination that surpassed any animal instinct previously recorded. Wolves, usually lone hunters or small packs, began moving in massive, highly organized groups, their movements so synchronized they seemed to think as one. Bears, usually solitary creatures, began to exhibit a kind of strategy in their actions, moving with precision and purpose. It wasn't just strength that these animals were now showing. It was intelligence, a terrifying intelligence that could match that of the humans who had long considered themselves the most advanced species on the planet. And it wasn't just the familiar animals that were evolving. In the shadowed corners of Earth's wilds, new creatures were appearing, mutations or entirely new species, blending traits that were once thought impossible. The very biology of the planet seemed to be changing in response to an unseen force. In the jungles, enormous serpents, half the size of skyscrapers, slithered through the trees, their eyes glowing with an eerie intelligence. In the oceans, creatures, once thought to be docile, were growing to massive sizes and showing signs of complex social structures. And in the deep, forgotten caves beneath the earth, massive, insect-like creatures began to emerge, their claws capable of tearing through rock as easily as a human could tear through paper. The scientific community, initially skeptical, soon found itself scrambling to understand the phenomenon. Teams of biologists, ecologists, and geneticists were sent to the wilds, desperate to document and study what was happening. Yet the more they learned, the more questions arose. The mutations were too rapid, too widespread, and too complex to be the result of natural evolutionary processes. Something was pushing Earth's creatures beyond their limits, something unknown and powerful. Theories ranged from genetic manipulation to some sort of cosmic interference, but none could explain the sheer scale of what was unfolding. As the world watched in disbelief, it quickly became clear that this wasn't a natural disaster. It was something far more dangerous. These creatures were evolving at an alarming rate, and their behaviors were no longer in line with what was expected of simple animals. No one knew how long it would be before they began to look at humans the same way they had always looked at prey. For the first time, humans found themselves at the bottom of the food chain, not in control, but at the mercy of a force they had never anticipated. But it wasn't just scientists who were taking notice. Military leaders, always quick to identify potential threats, began to understand the true power of what was emerging. Secret meetings were held, and it wasn't long before the world's most powerful governments acknowledged that Earth's creatures had become something much more than animals. They were becoming an unstoppable force. They had learned to communicate in ways that humans hadn't even begun to understand, and their strength had grown exponentially. It was no longer a question of how to protect humanity from these beasts. It was about how to harness their power. Could these new dangerous creatures be trained, controlled, or used as weapons? The idea seemed impossible, but the military wasn't about to ignore the potential. The first attempts to control the creatures went disastrously wrong. Attempts to domesticate the apex predators failed as these beasts displayed more resistance and cunning than even the most seasoned trainers could handle. And as military personnel attempted to contain them, they realized something even more terrifying. These creatures were not just stronger or more intelligent, they were also learning. The more they were tested, the more they adapted, each failure only making them more dangerous. The lions, wolves, and bears had begun to cooperate with one another in ways that had never been seen before. They weren't just adapting, they were evolving into something greater. As the world scrambled to understand what was happening, Earth's governments began to work in the shadows, forming secret alliances to unlock the potential of these new, terrifying creatures. Research into their biology intensified. Was there a way to communicate with them? Could humans control them? Or had they unknowingly unleashed a force too powerful to ever manage? The race to understand Earth's new beasts had begun, and with it came an overwhelming realization. The world's most fearsome predators were no longer just animals. They had become something far more terrifying, a species that could no longer be ignored. And as the military and scientists continued their work, one question lingered in the air. Who or what would be the true apex predator when the dust finally settled? The galaxy had long feared the Shorroth scourge, alien marauders known for their ruthless raids on helpless worlds. Their ships, massive and indestructible, struck terror into the hearts of all who crossed their path. The Shorroth were relentless, their weapons powerful enough to reduce entire civilizations to ashes. Their goal was simple: conquer, enslave, and move on to the next world. When they received the cryptic message from Earth, "Awaken," they dismissed it as the desperate plea of an insignificant species. Earth had no place in the grand scheme of the galaxy. They assumed their invasion would be swift, an easy conquest. After all, the Shorroth had faced much more formidable foes before and crushed them without breaking a sweat. But what the Shorroth did not expect was that Earth was no longer the same. The once quiet jungles, deserts, and oceans of the planet had given rise to something wild, unpredictable, and powerful beyond comprehension. Earth's apex predators had evolved at a pace that no one, not even the most brilliant scientists or military strategists, could have foreseen. Mutated creatures, massive in size and untamed in nature, were now a formidable force. Lions, wolves, bears, beasts once thought simple had now become living weapons, coordinated and intelligent. It was as though the planet itself had transformed into a living, breathing army, ready to defend its home from any threat. As the Shorroth descended upon Earth, they were confident in their victory. Their ships blotted out the sky, casting long shadows across the planet's surface. Their forces prepared for the easy capture of a planet they believed to be defenseless. However, as they made landfall, they were met with something completely unexpected. Instead of the weak, frightened humans they had anticipated, the Shorroth found themselves face to face with the untamed fury of Earth's mutated beasts. The first wave of attacks was nothing short of chaos. Massive creatures, giant bears, enormous serpents, and mutated elephants emerged from the wilds, charging at the Shorroth forces with primal rage. These beasts weren't just attacking, they were fighting with intelligence, coordinating their efforts as though they were following a plan. The Shorroth, accustomed to battling with overwhelming firepower and precise tactics, were caught off guard. They opened fire, their weapons blasting the terrain around them, but the creatures did not react in predictable ways. The mutated beasts seemed to anticipate every move, dodging, charging, and striking in ways that baffled the Shorroth. Their firepower, no matter how powerful, seemed almost ineffective against the creature's raw, physical strength. The battle that ensued was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As the Shorroth unleashed their full arsenal, Earth's creatures responded with a savage, untamed fury. The ground shook as massive mutated predators clashed with the invaders. Huge claws raked across Shorroth armor, while enormous jaws snapped down, breaking through their shields with terrifying ease. The Shorroth quickly realized they were not fighting a traditional army. These were not soldiers. They were beasts, creatures that could not be reasoned with, creatures that didn't follow the rules of warfare. Their attacks were wild, unpredictable, and relentless. As the battle raged on, it became clear that the Shoroth had underestimated their opponents. They had expected a simple invasion, a quick victory, but what they had encountered was a force of nature, one that could not be contained by technology or tactics. Earth's creatures fought with a ferocity that only nature could instill, and an ancient primal rage that had been dormant for centuries, now awakened and unleashed. The Shoroth, with their advanced weapons and superior numbers, struggled to hold their ground. For every Shoroth soldier that fell, it seemed another monstrous predator rose to take its place. The Shoroth commanders, once confident in their victory, began to panic. Their weapons were ineffective, and their strategy was failing. The creatures of Earth weren't following any predictable patterns. They were evolving in real time, adapting to every new tactic the Shoroth threw at them. The battle ended in a decisive defeat for the Shoroth. Their forces, battered and broken, were forced to retreat, leaving Earth's wilds untouched. In the aftermath, the world watched in awe as the mutated creatures returned to the wilds, their victory resonating across the planet. The Shoroth scourge had underestimated Earth, and now they would carry the scars of their mistake for all eternity. The victory of Earth's beasts sent a ripple of fear across the galaxy. If a simple, isolated world could produce such powerful creatures, what else was out there, waiting to be awakened? The galaxy's predators, once confident in their dominance, now began to fear the power of Earth's wild creatures. The first contact had ended in Earth's favor, but the true implications of what had just happened were only beginning to unfold. The Galactic Council, a coalition of the galaxy's most powerful and ancient species, gathered in urgent session. The once unchallenged rulers of the cosmos, the Zelthar Dominion, the Karnak Hive, and the Shoroth Scourge, had long believed themselves to be the apex of all life. They had conquered worlds, exterminated weaker species, and lived for eons in dominance. Yet now, a single, isolated world on the far edge of the galaxy had thrown their entire order into chaos. Earth, a planet they had long ignored, had suddenly proven to be more than just a primitive backwater. The creatures that inhabited it, once thought to be simple animals, had evolved into a deadly and coordinated force, easily overpowering the most feared species in the galaxy. And worse still, the creatures were not simply beasts. They were becoming something more, something untouchable. The council met in secret, deep within the heart of their most secure space station, far from prying eyes. Each member, representing one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, had their own reasons for wanting to eliminate Earth's newly awakened creatures. The Zelthar warlords, calculating and precise, were disturbed by the unpredictability of Earth's predators. The Karnak Hive, with their swarm mentality, saw the rise of such creatures as a challenge to their own dominance. Even the Shoroth, who had recently been humiliated by Earth's savage defenders, were eager to return and prove their superiority. The galaxy's balance of power had been shifted, and the Council would not let it stand. If Earth's beasts were left unchecked, it could threaten the very foundation of their rule. The Galactic Council's response was swift and overwhelming. They assembled an armada unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, a vast fleet of warships, each commanded by the galaxy's deadliest species. From the Zelthar's cold, precise tacticians to the Karnak's brutal, hive-driven warriors, the combined might of the galaxy's predators set course for Earth, ready to crush the threat once and for all. Their mission was clear: eliminate Earth's beasts, restore the natural order, and ensure that no species ever dared challenge their dominion again. But when the fleet arrived in Earth's orbit, they were met with something they had not anticipated. The planet's surface, once teeming with the chaos of battle, now appeared eerily calm. As the first wave of predators descended to the surface, ready to face whatever monstrous creatures awaited them, they soon realized they were walking into a trap. Earth's beasts were not simply animals. They were becoming sentient. These creatures, now far beyond the instincts of simple predators, had begun to form their own strategies. The Zelthar warlords, accustomed to battling species who obeyed logical structures, found themselves outmatched by the raw unpredictability of the Earth creatures' tactics. The first encounter between the invaders and Earth's predators was nothing short of a shock. The beasts, which had once been fierce but limited by their animal nature, were now coordinating their efforts in ways that baffled their foes. Massive mutated tigers, once solitary hunters, now moved in synchronized groups, coordinating attacks with a precision that rivaled any military force. Gigantic bears, normally slow and lumbering, now moved with surprising speed and agility, striking from unexpected angles. It became clear to the invaders that these were no longer simple animals. They were learning, they were adapting, they were evolving into something greater, and they were not going to back down. What was even more unsettling was that Earth's creatures seemed to have their own goals, their own desires. They were not fighting simply to defend their home. They were fighting for control. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy. The Zelthar warlords, accustomed to controlling the flow of any battle with their superior tactics, found themselves confused and disoriented. The Karnak Hive, masters of coordinated aggression, were met with a force that adapted to their swarming strategies, turning their own tactics against them. The Shoroth, who had once believed that sheer brutality could overcome any resistance, found themselves thwarted by the cunning and raw power of Earth's creatures. As the battle raged on, the invaders began to realize the terrifying truth. Earth's predators were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting for something far more important. They had evolved beyond their animal instincts. They were now sentient beings, capable of thought, emotion, and ambition. This was no longer a battle for survival. It was a struggle for dominance. Earth's creatures were not simply defending their home, they were laying claim to the stars. The Galactic Council, watching the conflict unfold from the safety of their warships, began to feel the weight of their mistake. The Earth's predators, once thought to be a simple threat, were now something far more dangerous. They were an unstoppable force, one that could change the entire balance of power in the galaxy. The question was no longer whether Earth could be defeated. It was whether any of them could. And as the first wave of invaders was pushed back, the galaxy began to understand that Earth was no longer just a planet in the far reaches of space. It was a power to be reckoned with, one that would demand respect from the galaxy's most feared predators. And Earth's newly awakened creatures, now with minds of their own, were ready to claim their place among the stars. The war for Earth had become something no one could have predicted. What had started as an unexpected defense by Earth's awakened creatures was now a full-scale battle, with entire species of alien invaders desperately trying to reclaim their lost supremacy. As the battle raged across the planet, the creatures of Earth, once simple animals, had grown far beyond their original instincts. They had gained sentience, intelligence, and a terrifying new power. No longer mere beasts, these predators now coordinated their attacks with a level of strategic intelligence that sent shockwaves through the ranks of the invaders. Earth's creatures, whether the towering bears, cunning wolves, or massive mutated big cats, began to work together, forming intricate alliances. It was clear that their newfound intelligence had allowed them to see the bigger picture. Survival and domination were no longer solely in the hands of the invaders. The creatures were learning fast, adapting to every move the enemy made. They began to understand human tactics, using the tools and strategies of the planet's inhabitants to their advantage. In cities across the globe, humans and animals now fought side by side. The humans, initially caught off guard by the sudden rise of these new predators, now worked in tandem with them, offering their technological prowess to the beasts in exchange for protection. Together, they formed a brutal alliance that had one goal: to push back the invaders and reclaim the planet. The most terrifying new development was the creatures' ability to communicate, not just with each other, but with technology. Their minds, once limited to simple animal instincts, had evolved far beyond what anyone had anticipated. They could now manipulate electronics, control machines, and even use human technology against the alien invaders. One of the first signs of this terrifying new power came when a group of mutated wolves, normally solitary hunters, managed to break into a human military base. They hacked into the base's communication systems and used the base's own weapons to launch a devastating counterattack against the Karnak Hive's forces. The alien invaders, who once relied on their own advanced technology to dominate, now found themselves being outwitted by creatures who had no understanding of the technology they were using, but instinctively knew how to wield it. The Karnak Hive, known for their hive mind and brutal swarming tactics, were the first to truly struggle against this new form of warfare. Their hive mind, which had always given them strength in numbers and perfect coordination, was no match for the unpredictability and cunning of Earth's beasts. The creatures of Earth didn't rely on mere numbers. They fought with a combination of primal ferocity and calculated strategy, adapting to every tactic the hive tried to employ. The Karnak's swarming attacks, once devastating to lesser species, now faltered as the beasts of Earth used the terrain to their advantage, setting ambushes and attacking in ways that bewildered the hive's hive-mind coordination. Even their once feared insectoid soldiers were overwhelmed by the creature's quick thinking and strategic ambushes. Meanwhile, the Zelthar, notorious for their technological superiority, found themselves facing an entirely different kind of threat. The Zelthar had always been confident in their powerful weaponry and precision attacks. They were cold, calculating, and efficient, traits that had helped them conquer countless planets. But Earth's predators were no longer predictable. These creatures didn't fear their advanced weapons or their massive ships. Instead, they learned to use the Zelthar's technology against them. One by one, the Zelthar warlords' ships fell into disarray as their own communications were hijacked, their weapons turned against them, and their fleets ambushed by the very creatures they had come to dominate. The Zelthar and Karnak forces quickly realized the terrifying truth. Earth's creatures were not just surviving, they were evolving at an exponential rate, using the very tools and tactics of their enemies to level the playing field. Every time the invaders tried to adapt, the predators of Earth found new ways to counter. The battle had become a brutal war of attrition, with Earth's creatures proving to be an unstoppable force. They were no longer simply fighting to protect their planet. They were fighting for their place in the cosmos, and they would not be dominated. Across the globe, the war continued to intensify. As the creatures of Earth honed their abilities and human technology adapted to support their new allies, it became increasingly clear that the invaders were losing. The final victory was no longer just a possibility. It was becoming inevitable. Earth's predators had transformed into something far more dangerous than the invaders had ever expected. They were warriors of the wild, creatures who had not only evolved to survive, but to conquer. And as the war raged on, one thing became clear to the galaxy. Earth was no longer a backwater planet to be ignored. It was a world of warriors, a world that had awakened and was ready to claim its place among the stars. The war between Earth's awakened predators and the invading galactic forces had reached a critical point. The once chaotic battles had evolved into an all-out struggle for survival, with the invaders now finding themselves on the defensive. Earth's creatures, each more formidable than the last, had proven themselves to be a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But despite their strength, intelligence, and newfound ability to communicate with human technology, the Earth's beasts had one glaring weakness: they were divided. While individual species had adapted and evolved, they still fought in isolation, each animal acting in the interest of its kind rather than as part of a greater whole. Humanity, once caught in the wake of the wild's resurgence, now saw the way forward. The greatest minds in military strategy, biology, and animal behavior gathered in secret, determined to find a way to unite the creatures of Earth into a single, focused force. It was clear that only through unification could the planet's defenders hope to push back the alien invaders. Working with scientists, behaviorists, and animal specialists, they developed a plan. They would need to forge alliances between species that had never before worked together. Beasts of the jungle, the plains, the oceans, and even the skies. Lions and wolves, predators that had once been rivals, would now fight side by side. The massive elephants, once seen as peaceful giants, would now stand as a shield to protect the swift and deadly big cats. Eagles, with their unmatched aerial abilities, would scout and strike from above, while the deep-sea leviathans, creatures of the ocean's depths, would wage war against the invaders' amphibious forces. The first sign of the unification came when lions, usually solitary hunters, were seen moving in coordinated groups with wolves, using their strength and agility to overwhelm smaller enemy units. The once proud predators of Earth were no longer acting on impulse, but as a single, unified force, operating with a new purpose and a deep understanding of strategy. Elephants, whose towering size and immense strength had always made them formidable, were now working in tandem with humans and the predators, forming defensive lines and using their massive tusks to tear through enemy armor. It was the unlikeliest of alliances, an alliance born from necessity but strengthened by a shared goal. Across the globe, the war began to shift in Earth's favor. The invaders, who had once believed their superiority was assured, began to question everything they had known. The sheer coordination of the wild's forces, combined with their primal ferocity, was proving to be too much for the alien invaders. Earth's creatures were no longer just wild beasts. They were warriors of the wild, fighting with unity, purpose, and intelligence. They had become a single, unstoppable force, with every species working in concert to push back the invaders. The Kai. Invaders' military commanders, once certain of victory, found themselves in disarray. The Zelthar Dominion, who had relied on cold calculation and precise tactics, struggled to adapt to the ferocious, unpredictable nature of Earth's combined predators. The Karnak hive, with its swarm mentality, was baffled by the creatures' ability to fight as individuals while still maintaining a unified strategy. For the first time in the war, the invaders were no longer in control. They were being forced into retreat. In every corner of the Earth, the battles raged on, but now, Earth's predators were fighting with a sense of purpose that no one had anticipated. They were no longer simply defending their home. They were claiming it, taking back what had been threatened, and doing so with an intensity that no invader could match. The deep-sea leviathans rose from the oceans, their massive forms crashing into the invaders' fleets, tearing through ships as though they were made of paper. Eagles swooped down from the skies, tearing apart enemy supply lines and scouting the battlefield with razor-sharp precision. On land, the lions, wolves, and elephants launched coordinated attacks, overwhelming the alien forces with their raw power and newfound unity. The invaders, once certain of their victory, began to realize that they had gravely underestimated Earth. The creatures they had dismissed as primitive were now a unified and deadly force. As the final battle approached, the alien forces found themselves surrounded on all sides by the relentless, coordinated might of Earth's creatures. What had once been a war of domination had now become a struggle for survival, not just for the invaders, but for the future of the galaxy itself. Earth's greatest strength had not been in its advanced technology or its military might. It had been in its ability to unite its creatures, to forge alliances that no one had thought possible. And as the final counteroffensive began, it was clear that Earth's predators, united under a single banner, were a force that no one in the galaxy could stop. The invaders, once the rulers of the stars, were now nothing more than a footnote in the history of Earth's rise. The wilds had been unleashed and they would not be tamed. The galaxy, once a realm of dominance and fear, now trembled as the final battle for Earth unfolded in its wildest corners. The invaders, those few who had survived the relentless counteroffensive of Earth's creatures, were about to face a foe they could never have imagined, a force that had united in ways the galaxy's greatest minds could never predict. As the last remnants of the galactic powers gathered for their final push, they found themselves on a battlefield unlike any other. The oceans, forests, and skies of Earth had become the stage for a war that would determine not just the fate of a single planet, but the future of the entire galaxy. The great predators of Earth, now fully aware of their own power and purpose, led the charge. The lions, wolves, elephants, eagles, and even the monstrous leviathans from the deepest oceans surged forward, their primal instincts merged with a newly gained intelligence that made them formidable beyond measure. Each species had been transformed, not just into fighting machines, but into tactical minds capable of understanding complex strategies, adapting, and overcoming. The invaders, once the supreme conquerors of the galaxy, found themselves caught in a brutal storm. They had underestimated the ferocity of Earth's wilds, and now they were paying the price. The battle raged across the planet's surface and deep into its heart. The skies were filled with the screeches of eagles swooping down to dismantle enemy ships, their talons cutting through the metal hulls as though they were paper. On land, the lions and wolves worked together in perfect harmony, using their combined strength and cunning to strike at the invaders' weakest points. Massive elephants, their size and power unmatched, crushed through the alien forces, creating gaps in their defenses. In the oceans, the great leviathans, once considered creatures of myth, emerged with terrifying force, their enormous bodies wreaking havoc on the invaders' fleets. The creatures of Earth had become a perfect symphony of nature, each species playing its role in a unified effort to push back the forces that had come to enslave them. The invaders, who had once been confident in their advanced weaponry, found themselves outmatched at every turn. Their fleets, armed with the most deadly technologies the galaxy had ever seen, were torn apart by creatures that didn't fear their weapons or tactics. Earth's beasts, guided by the humans who had now learned to fight alongside them, turned the invaders' own technology against them. The alien forces were no longer the hunter, they were the hunted. The final hours of the battle saw the invaders retreating in disarray, their once proud fleets scattered and their commanders in shock. Earth had shown them something they could never have anticipated: the untamed power of nature, fused with the intellect and ingenuity of its inhabitants. When the dust finally settled, the galaxy was left in stunned silence. Earth, a planet once overlooked and dismissed as insignificant, now stood victorious. Its beasts, once considered simple animals, had proven to be the true rulers of the stars. The Galactic Council, once confident in their control over the universe, now faced a terrifying reality. Earth was no longer just a distant, unremarkable world. It was an empire in the making. The power of Earth's predators, combined with the ingenuity of humanity, had reshaped the balance of the galaxy. What had been a desperate struggle for survival had become a statement. Earth was not to be trifled with. The invaders had not just been defeated. They had been broken, forced to retreat, and left to question the true meaning of power in the galaxy. As the survivors of the Galactic Council pondered their defeat, Earth sent a message, a simple, chilling warning to the rest of the galaxy. The words were stark, clear, and filled with a promise that echoed through the void of space. "We are the beasts. Beware." The message reverberated through the stars, reaching every corner of the galaxy. It was not just a threat. It was a declaration of dominance. Earth had not only survived, it had conquered. The once feared predators of the galaxy now looked upon Earth's warriors with fear and respect. The galaxy had been irrevocably changed, and as Earth's triumphant beasts stood alongside humanity, one truth became clear. They were the true rulers of the stars, and no force in the universe could ever again challenge their reign.